The case of James Esses serves as a troubling reminder of the dangers posed by heavy-handed academic approach to dissent on university and college campuses. What happened to Esses, a former barrister who was summarily expelled from his psychotherapy program for raising concerns about transgender issues and the treatment of children, highlights a growing trend where academic institutions seem increasingly eager to express viewpoints or to suppress viewpoints that diverge from the prevailing orthodoxy. Esses' experience is not an isolated incident, but rather part of a broader disturbing pattern in higher education where institutions appear to be prioritizing ideological conformity over intellectual diversity and academic freedom. By expelling Esses without due process and publicizing this decision on Twitter, Matanoia Institute demonstrates an appalling disregard for the principles of fairness, empathy, reasoned debate that should be the bedrock of any educational institution. It's behaved like a thug, and it's had to eat its words and take back this student. The Institute's actions, which they have now admitted were in breach of their own policies, are a stark example of how academic power can be abused to intimidate and silence dissent. This form of summary justice, executed without the opportunity for defence or dialogue, can only be described as a repugnant display of bullying, intimidation, and injustice. And in the academic realm, where ideas should be debated and scrutinised, not censored, such behaviour is antithetical to the very purpose of education. It's an embarrassment. The implications of this case extend far beyond James Esses himself, and I'm really impressed that he took this case forward. Universities and colleges are increasingly becoming environments where dissenting opinions are not just discouraged but actively punished, either by the universities themselves or by government intervention. This has a chilling effect on free speech and the healthy exchange of ideas, which are essential for intellectual growth and the progress of society. Even ideas we don't like, if we don't discuss them in the freedom of, let's say, a place like a university, they're going to go underground, they're going to emerge later, and we won't know what to say to them. Academic freedom is under siege, not just in the UK, but globally, as institutions yield to ideological pressures and seek to enforce a narrow view of acceptable discourse. This isn't education, this is indoctrination. And this phenomenon can be seen in other instances, such as the case of Professor Kathleen Stock at the University of Sussex, who resigned after facing intense pressure and harassment for her views on gender and sex. Similarly, in the United States, Professor Peter Boghossian faced a backlash and eventually left his position at Portland State University due to what he described as an increasingly intolerant and dogmatic atmosphere, particularly around issues of race, gender, and identity. You don't need to agree with these people to recognize that this is a space where there must be the freedom to discuss ideas even if they're not popular. These cases underscore a concerning trend where academic institutions, instead of being bastions of free inquiry, have become gatekeepers of a particular ideological narrative. Maybe even a popular ideological narrative, but an ideological narrative nevertheless. I am terribly proud that Oxford University, that the Oxford Union Society, had Tommy Robinson, for example, all those years ago, to speak. Terribly important. Had Nixon to speak. Terribly important. It is not the role of education to suppress. It's the role of education to foster critical thinking, to debate, to explore diverse, contradictory, inappropriate perspectives. Instead, the rise of what can be described as an academic mob mentality threatens to stifle innovation, creativity, the very process and the progress that universities are supposed to be championing. As I say, if we don't look at the things that we disagree with, then we never know what we're facing. We may have an instinct that we don't like something, but until we hear it, how do we know? How do we know? And how do we learn to respond to something if we haven't tried out our response in a safe environment? The settlement reached in James Esses' case is significant because it sends a clear message that there are consequences for institutions that overreach their attempts to control discourse. And in the case of James Esses, it's not just that he was shut down, it's the way he was shut down. So the reversal is not alone is not alone and not enough. There needs to be a broader cultural shift within academia where the value of free speech and open debate is once again recognized as paramount. Only by recommitting to these principles can universities fulfill their true purpose and avoid the pitfalls of becoming echo chambers where only certain views are tolerated. The wider academic community must take heed of the lessons from this case and others like it. If universities continue to suppress dissent, they risk losing their credibility as places of learning and inquiry. The role of education is to challenge students to think critically, creatively, independently, not to mould them into adherents of a particular ideology. This is also incidentally to be seen in the way that now PhDs are being sort of forced through a particular system. This is how you write. Actually, how you write is so that your ideas are clear, coherent, and well supported. The actual format that you use should not necessarily be dictated by an academic institution or indeed by ChatGPT. There are methods for writing, but the key method is to be clear. And the academic abuse of power has always been there, and it's seen in the treatment of James Esses. It must be recognised, it must be resisted, not just for the sake of those directly affected, but for the future of higher education itself and for the messages that sends out to education across the board.